This video is not about the specific reasons for a war, rather it's a higher or more meta perspective on why we have war in the first place, the purpose of war, and the reason we have it. So first, why we have war? If you really boil it down, war is a byproduct of being finite. Now that may sound very cryptic, but allow me to clarify what I mean by this. What I mean is that war is a byproduct of identifying with a finite thing. Identifying with something limited. At the lowest level, identifying as yourself. Your body and your mind. You say, this is me. See, now identifying as your body and mind already pits you against everyone else. Because there's a you trying to compete with everybody else. And there's a limited amount of resources. And because there's a limited amount of resources, you have to compete against others. We can use a thought experiment to clarify this level. Imagine you're on a deserted island with two other people, and there's only enough food for one. Very quickly your survival instincts would go into play, and you'd end up fighting for the food. You start waging war against the two other people on the island, because it's you versus them. The main driving factor of conflicts is survival mechanisms. Because of course, everyone wants to survive. And everyone wants the best chances of survival. So even if there would be resources for everyone, someone might still use up all the resources in an effort to better their position of survival. The main takeaway is they want to survive. They want their identity to survive. If you consider yourself your body and your mind, you'll want that to survive. If you identify with your ideas, you'll want them to survive, and so forth. One thing to clarify is that it's not just biological organisms that try to survive. Institutions, religions, countries, etc. They all try to survive. And they're all equally controlled by survival mechanisms, albeit on a more complex and higher level. But what you and all the other groups have in common is that they all identify with being a limited thing. A group of people or an idea that they put inside of a box of restrictions. This is us, and that's them. The circle of us is always limited, and there's always a them out there. For example, our religion, their religion, our country, their country. Our belief system, and theirs. And this is what creates wars. So what we're talking about here are levels of identification. What is within that circle? And the lower we go, the more limited our identity becomes. The more enemies and competition we'll have. And to determine how limited something is, it's good to ask, what does it consider as us and what does it consider as them? And how much us encompasses is how large the identity is. So you can ask yourself, who do you consider as us? Is your family part of us? Your countrymen? What about people from another country? Another continent? What if we discover aliens? Would you consider them as us? So the first level of identification is with you. And when you expand your circle a bit, it encompasses your family and friends. You identify as part of your family and friend group. And when it comes to wars, this is most easily seen in gang wars. Gangs are just families and friends that wage war against other families and friends. And after that, if we expand our circle even more, we identify with our country and culture. Could also be identifying with a specific belief system. Identifying with being Christian or Hindu, right-wing or left-wing, conservative or liberal, and so forth. And identifying with a specific culture, country, or belief system is what leads to racism. It's the reason for religious wars, political wars, geographic wars, and more. But you can probably recognize that there's always an us and a them. Our race versus theirs, our country versus theirs. But if you look at reality, our borders are imaginary. There are no real borders between countries. We have just decided to draw a line somewhere. And quickly we start seeing them in reality, even though they're all really in our head. But it's difficult because we create real systems and governments based on these imaginary lines. On our circle, the lines are the edges. As an example, look at this. There's no given line anywhere. We might be able to perceive a small difference between color A and color B, but really, they're both red. We can create the distinction between red A and red B and draw a line between them, but in reality, there is no such a distinction. Really, they're just part of the same screen, made up of identical pixels. And we make up the difference in our minds. So war is a byproduct of us imagining these distinctions between people, cultures, countries, etc. I know it's a radical thought that there are no distinctions, that they're all just in our minds. But you can try to remember that reality is constructed in our minds. Okay, so then, the larger an identity is, the better. The more things that are considered as us, the better. There's a slimmer chance of war if instead of competing against 7 billion things, you compete against 3. And that's where we get to the solution for world peace. If everyone thought of each other as part of the same group, there would be no war. We just have to increase our field of identification. Increase what we consider as us. Start considering every person as part of the same group. Consider every plant and animal as part of the same group. And at the final level, the whole universe as one group. At the final stage, you identify as being the whole universe. You are not just you. You are not just your family. Not your country or culture. Not just a human. You are the whole universe. Out.